Hey guys, what's going on everybody? Thomas here once again. Today we are here with the top 10 worst video game villains. So I'm not sure how he's going to rank them as like the worst. Maybe just a bad boss fight, though I think that's a separate list altogether. So I'm guessing lack of motivation, aesthetic, all that. Well, might as well see what Josh came up with. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
Great villains can add to a story. In other news, fire hot. But in the same vein, a poor villain can easily subtract from one. These are the villains we hate, not because of the evil deeds they commit, but they are written or executed so poorly that they bring down the whole experience. What are the reasons for this? To be honest, this is
extremely subjective.
But I have noticed some patterns not only in how I react, but in how others react. Number one, they are a twist villain and it either didn't make sense, you saw it coming from a mile away, or the story would have been more interesting without the twist. 2. Their motivations suck, e.g. I will destroy the world to save it. Number 3. Their plans either make no sense, should not have worked, or are just complex for no reason. Number 4. They don't serve as a legitimate threat or obstacle to the player if we're supposed to take them seriously. Number 5. If we're supposed to find them charming or silly, we find them more insufferable. Number 6. The story focuses on them a lot, but you're left wondering things like, why weren't they at this plot point? Or if you take them out, does the story change, like, at all? Or if you defeat them, they feel like a bump in the road in terms of how they affect the player or the pro tags. Number 7, their fight sucked. And no matter how great your writing is, you can't save it from that. The way we're going to be ranking these is based on how much they detract from the overall experience of their respective game or game series. If a lousy villain is minor enough that we can just ignore them, they'll be lower. Same principle applies if the story was already a mess before they came along.
Before we get started, here's an
This video is sponsored by the Waifu Handbook Kickstarter.
I swear I'm not lazy, I'm just really busy taking care of 2 babies, a broken dishwasher, and I have 3 TTRPG games this week that I forgot to get a new advertisement made, though the information hasn't really changed, so here we go, I'm sorry.
This behemoth of weeaboo cringe is compatible with D&D 5e as well as Pathfinder 1st and 2nd editions.
God be praised.
But the reason I'm not voicing these sections myself is I literally just put the kids down and I don't want to wake them up.
If you want to spice up your D&D game with waifu-inspired classes, NPCs, ancestries, plus an easily understandable cooking system,
I worked very hard on stuff for 2e, maybe too hard.
Then this is the book for you. I do get 10% of the Kickstarter proceeds, so supporting this project does support the channel. If you head to getwaifu.loadingcrewcrafts.com by clicking the link in the description and the pinned comment, this will take you to our VIP page. By submitting a $1 deposit, you are guaranteeing yourself the best spot, granting you 10% off on a softcover book.
Oh, demo material is also available to VIPs and anyone who's a member, Twitch sub, or patron of Loading Crew, so do that please.
So go ahead and click on, and remember, if you want to get on the best deal of the Kickstarter, click on the getwaifu.loadingcrewcrafts.com link in the description for 10% off the cost of the Kickstarter, and of course, your free hardcover upgrade. Remember, supporting this project also supports my channel. Thank you all so much for listening, and back to your regularly scheduled content. Villains in the Xeno franchise are very hit or miss. On the one hand, you got guys like Myong, Albedo, and Jin. Then you got guys like Krellian, Kevin, and Amalthus. Of course, any of them are phenomenal villains compared to Lorithia. Right off the bat, Lorithia is revealed to secretly be plotting against the heroes. Then she just sits there until you get to the endgame. And when she reveals herself as a villain, she has no motivation or depth other than, I'm the bad guy and I want to do bad guy stuff. It feels obligatory. Like she was put there just so Zanza could have 3 disciples. And then there's her boss fight. It's one thing that the arena contains annoyingly damaging pools of ether. It's one thing that she gives herself ridiculous buffs that are hard to work around. It's a whole nother thing that you constantly have to hear.
You'll pay for your insolence. You'll pay for your insolence. You'll pay for your insolence. Pay for your insolence.
Think you can take me? Don't forget me.
There, I paid for my insolence. Happy now? Hey, here's an idea. Why not actually do something with Lorithia being a part of the High Entia? I mean, there's that whole big power vacuum thing after the Emperor dies, so shouldn't she try to take them over? Like, maybe Zanza promised her control of them, but conveniently left out the whole mutating them thing. She could have a full villainous breakdown after seeing what actually happens. In that case, she might actually have something resembling character depth. The only reason Lorithia is so low is because of how little she actually does in the grand scheme of things. She's entirely overshadowed by Metalface and Zanza, who actually affect the plot. I shouldn't be praising that, but here we are.
See ya.
Hey, you know how everyone likes Wheatley from Portal 2, right?
Yeah.
Sure, it wasn't as great as GLaDOS, but it's hardly fair comparing an A-tier villain to an S-tier villain. Well, what if instead of hilariously pathetic and power crazed, you took away everything that made him charming, made him the textbook definition of insufferable, and still expect him to be the next endgame baddie? What? You don't like that? Well, too bad. 343 Guilty Spark exists, and he's down in F tier. Just a brief recap, Spark here is the monitor for Halo. As part of his protocol, he acts as our guide to help stop the flood outbreak. But his methods kinda involve wiping out all sentient life in the galaxy, so big no-no on his part. But afterward, he becomes an ally on your journey to end the flood. But then throws a tantrum and kills Johnson to save his precious Halo from destruction and becomes... the final boss for Halo 3.
Haha. Oh, you're not joking.
I sincerely wish I was. Yeah, Halo 3, one of the most hyped games in gaming history, promising to finish the fight. And the final boss is 343 Guilty Spark. I don't think you understand. Right off the bat, since Halo 1, the guy was so irritating to listen to. He perpetually sounds like a snob, and it's almost like he's carefully choosing his words to sound as condescending as possible.
But you already knew that. I mean, how good is you?
The answer to this question? Why, it's this, of course. Obviously, freaking die! Well, he's not doing that. He's either insulting you or giving you half-truths, carefully leaving out stuff that would break his precious protocol. Big talk for a shiny hacky sack. Now, I've said that having an annoying villain isn't always a bad thing. It is, admittedly, a very perilous line to straddle. But intentionally insufferable is still insufferable. Yes, he's intended to be incredibly hated. It's clear. I think they overdid it. Whenever he appears, or whenever he says anything, it just elicits groans. They balanced it out a bit more by seeing karma catch up with him more often. Maybe he could have been more tolerable. Or at least we get a chuckle seeing him fail. Instead, we have to constantly suck up to him because he's necessary.
You want me to strangle?
No, we need him.
But the biggest disappointment with this floating hockey puck, this is the endgame baddie of the original 3 games. This tiny little ball is the follow-up to the freaking grave mine. You know, the one who's controlling the flood. It's like building up Thanos for an entire series and the final villain is freaking MODOK. Not to mention, Spark's fight isn't even that hard. He's only got 2 attacks and he barely even defends himself. I mean, he'd probably work as a great early boss, not the final one. I know there's a lot of history and lore behind him, like him being once human and going nuts in isolation. That's cool and all, but that doesn't really do much to fix how annoying he truly is. And yet we're kind of forced to take him seriously since he killed one of the most beloved characters in the franchise. In the back! If he didn't do that, there's no way that any other game could consider this little meatball a legitimate threat. Is it any wonder the Halo games went downhill after 343 Industries started working on them? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I think I see what's happening. Way too coincidental.
As I mentioned in the past, the Tales series has a pretty good track record with villains. They have interesting backstories, good dynamics with our heroes, and at the very least understandable motivations. So this makes Heldalf from Tales of Zestiria all the more terrible by comparison. The biggest problem with Heldalf as a villain is that he barely does anything villainous. Yes, he kicks off the plot by starting the spread of malevolence, but he barely does anything after that. Most of the time, it feels like the game forgets he's even there. You'd really think the Lord of Calamity would be more active in spreading malevolence, and even when he does try to make trouble for the heroes, it almost always completely backfires. Yes, he does have subordinates, but they barely try to get in your way. As for his backstory, it's essentially a poor man's version of Erskine and Arthas, the whole fallen, betrayed hero bit. But while their descent into villainy came from being forced to make horrifying decisions, Heldalf was just a guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. And because a guy gave him a ridiculously contrived curse. And then there's his dynamic with the heroes, or lack thereof, where previous villains may have actually shared motivations or past with them. Heldalf had none of that. Heldalf wants to stop Sore because he's the Lord of Calamity. Sore wants to stop Heldalf because he's the Shepherd. It's just roles that require them to hate each other. Now, if that was a major theme, like the excellent Zelda animation A Hero's Purpose deconstructs, nah. Dawn of the New World had a better hero-villain dynamic than Cesteria. Heck, Sing 2 had a better hero-villain dynamic than Cesteria. As for how I would suggest improvements, strap in, we're going to be here for a while. First off, make Heldalf actually proactive in the story. If he wants to contaminate the world with malevolence, have him, actually try to do so. Have him instigate conflicts, manipulate people in power, and tempt others to his side. The big war between Highland and Rolance, have him be the one who started it. As for his backstory, here's the thing. In the manga, it was implied that Heldalf and Sore were secretly father and son, yet neither of them were aware of it. There it is. Go somewhere with that. Have him be the father to Sore, but they got separated after the whole Camlon incident. But while Sore forgets it due to trauma-induced amnesia, Heldalf remembers. Now, Heldalf has an actual reason to want Sore to join his side. He wants to rule together as father and son. And now Sore has an actual reason to want to purify Heldalf other than, that's what heroes do. Then, during the final battle, Sore refuses to kill him, wanting to give Heldalf a chance to redeem himself. Or you could just watch the anime, where they actually did do that.
Yeah, I mean, he ain't wrong. Just yikes. They really dropped the ball with the guy, haven't they? Like, seriously. Had so many chances, and yet just, whoops. Oh boy. I guess Hysteria was kind of a low point for, Tales franchise. Though I'm not sure what the low point was. If you guys know, let me know, because I barely play it. Move along.
The wonderful, innocent Pokemon world. A world where you're free to leave your home and get roped into diabolical schemes concocted by environmental terrorists, animal rights extremists, gangsters, cults, and the theater improv team Mafia. Improvisation. Like the rivals, villain teams are a staple of the Pokemon franchise for better or worse. Fans have said that Team Flare may be the worst ones, and I can see it. Their goal of beautifying the world was groan-worthy, more so considering these guys probably got just blindfolded in the dark. However, their methods to reach it were actually effective and dangerous. Not to mention, Lysandre is objectively terrifying, albeit obvious. To fit that bill, we focus on another black sheep of the franchise, Sword and Shield. No, not Team Yell. Yeah, they're marketed as the main baddies of the games, but they're just obnoxious and overbearing football fans dedicated to one of our rivals, Marnie. Can't really place them on the same pedestal as, say, Aqua and Magma or Galactic. Now, I'm talking about the actual villains of Gen 8, Macrocosmos. Ari really put it best on her tier list. Their leader, Chairman Rose, has an actual reason for what he's doing. No, a great reason. But it makes no sense. He's basically risking bringing about the apocalypse to try and solve an energy crisis that's probably 1,000 years in the future, as literally everyone keeps pointing out to him. Unless he's doing a side project where he's building a life extender like in TF2, why is this suddenly his problem? I mean, if we're happening sooner, like 10 years or even next year, then I could understand his urgency. But no, he takes advantage of a young trainer, summons frickin' Azathoth, and nearly causes the apocalypse for something that could have been fixed long after he's dead and probably cryogenically frozen. I don't know why. I kind of see him being that kind of guy. You can see they tried to do the evil corporation bad story, but honestly, they handled it in a very bizarre way. They couldn't decide whether they're supposed to hate or sympathize with him, but we're in a weird spot where we can't do either. Like, the pieces are there. His boss theme is pretty cool, and trying to fight the economic equivalent of Exelon and Disney combined has potential. Notice I'm talking mostly about Rose and not Macrocosmos itself. That's because there's barely anything to discuss. You don't even fight any of them until near the end of the game. At least the Ether Foundation reveal in Gen 7 had a decent excuse. They weren't evil at first, so their early appearance made the surprise work more. But we're supposed to believe that these corporate flunkies were the true villains all along when they don't pop up until near the end? Yeah, no thanks. At the very least, make these guys less shoehorned, have an early build-up, make them be marketed as the big bads, and make having to deal with them feel more natural. Oh, they took a page from Disney's Twist Villains book, didn't they?
That was his mistake.
Also, like change the things we brought them to show like the effect of it.
Hey guys,
made it sympathetic.
This is gonna sound weird, but I think I'm running out of ways to make fun of EA. Quick, someone find me something to rag on them for that I haven't talked about yet.
You will
nail.
Whew! That was a close one. I almost had to cut them some slack. Corypheus is one of the first Darkspawn in the lore of the Dragon Age franchise. He made his debut as the main baddie of the DLC for Dragon Age 2, and the battle's just crap.
Bye.
It's a crappy fight. Even on normal, you have to micromanage your party members or they get utterly annihilated. It felt more like a raid boss that forced you to pause every 10 seconds to direct your teammates, only they listen for 15 seconds before you have to tell them again, and okay, that's just a raid boss. But hey, there's a pretty decent lore around him, and what with the little presence he had, he seemed fairly impressive. Maybe just needs another game to show us how much of a threat he really is. Well, he got his chance as the main villain of Dragon Age Inquisition, and what'd they give him?
Nothing!
Zip!
Thank you, buddy.
Nada! Big ol' goose egg! How in the hell do you upgrade a DLC villain to the big bad for a whole game, and yet it feels like a downgrade? Well, first of all, you would have thought he'd been a villain with more gravitas and personality for being one of the first Darkspawn and one of the failed usurpers of God. But nope, he is so boring and generic. His dialogue, just listen to this.
I knew you would come.
It ends here, Corypheus.
And so it shall.
Nearly every line that comes out of this guy's mouth is just cliched bad guy schlop. I say nearly because I counted on one hand, one single solitary line that actually managed to grab my interest.
Beg that I succeed, for I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
You see that? That is actually kind of badass. Because it gives us some insight into his character. Yeah, it's basically Gore the God Butcher for Dragon Age, but it's something. The rest of the time, it's just more generic, I want to be a god type speak with non-existent weight to it. It's really hard to glean the kind of person he is from his dialogue or appearance. No, you have to read all that incendiary text log BS. Yeah, there's talk about him being an actual threat, but when people say he's so powerful and scary, it's hard to believe him when it takes so long for him to frickin' do anything. The reason it worked for someone like Voss from Far Cry 3 is that with how little Voss appeared in the game, he showed why people are so afraid of him. He's charismatic, he's unhinged, he's unpredictable. Whereas Corypheus, he's just stale. Oh, and the only thing worse than his character is his track record. That being, he gets f***ing up at every single turn. He doesn't know jack about being a military commander. Oh, and get this. You want to know how he progressed the story? By being a complete screw-up. Yeah, it really steals a lot of his gravitas away when you find out he sets the events of Inquisition in motion by accident.
I made a boo-boo, yeah.
It's sad because despite how brief his appearance was in DA2, it had a lot of potential. They just have to keep spelling out how evil he is without any substance. At the very least, make him a competent strategist, or at least tune up his dialogue. Having a villain be evil just to be evil can work if they're threatening or entertaining. Heck, have him be super hammy. It'll really offset the more melancholy villain.
Here. I got nothing to say.
I think one of the most underappreciated aspects of the Sly trilogy is the main villains. Even Nayla, who is obviously the weakest of the three, is still a backstabbing, conniving bitch who toyed with Sly's heart and made us love to hate her. And then, just like with so many other things, Sly 4 came along to ruin everything. Oh, trust me, it was so tempting to put Penelope on here. She was a mediocre antagonist in Sly 3, and her character assassination in Sly 4 is just... I'll save that for a different rant on a different list. Today we're talking about Cyril Le Paradox. It's difficult to truly convey how much of a downgrade this skunk is from the rest of the Sly series. Honestly, how did we go from this?
Revenge is the prime ingredient in the fountain of youth.
And this?
There they are, Contessa. Just as I promised. The Cooper Gang and Rajan all incapacitated.
And this?
Time does strange things to people. Just look at the real leader of your gang. Bentley.
Whatever. We're friends. Equal.
Then why is it called the Cooper Gang, you self-centered egomaniac?
To this.
I did not wish to die!
The Paradox is pathetic, and not in an enjoyable way either. The guy does nothing for himself the whole game, letting his lackeys do all the real work, taking all the credit, acting like he's somehow Sly's rival, and this worthless sack of stink is the one who gets the honor of taking Sly down in a quick time event. There is no justice in this world. So what's this skunk about? As far as we know, Sly's dad beat Le Paradox's dad to a heist, got thrown in the slammer, and Le Paradox grew up to be a failure of a thief and blamed the Coopers. In a ham-fisted attempt to make Sly and Le Paradox comparable, apparently Le Paradox too comes from a long line of thieves. Yeah, I don't see any immortal, ancient, robotic owls coming after his family line, so they probably weren't too great at it anyway. Probably doesn't help that this guy's the worst, most grating French accent I've ever heard, with his whiny, high-pitched voice.
Flattery will get you nowhere.
Yeah, Pepe Le Pew would call for copyright infringement, but he's been canceled. And the worst part, the absolute worst of it all, even after getting one over on Sly, he still goes down like a chump. He doesn't even have the decency to be dead after that. He just carted out to jail like any of the other low-level baddies Sly beats on his way to the final boss. I wish I could talk more about the boss fight itself, but the whole thing is just a quick time event. There's actually nothing to talk about. Everything about Le Paradox is unsatisfying, from his backstory to his fight to what happens after. Man, this guy stinks.
This is the guy that cut Sly second time.
Before Fire Emblem Engage came in and gave us some traditional villains that are actually decent again, a lot of the titular villains in modern Fire Emblem have been less than remarkable. It's jarring that of all of the things modern Fire Emblem got right, the villains seem to be the ones that sucked for a while. This says a lot considering how the old games have a fantastic track record with Arvis, Zephiel, Nurgle, Leon, and the Black Knight. In these ones, Valadar is an evil wizard so incompetent the protagonist foresaw his every move. Garen is an evil king so boring that it's aggravating when the story keeps trying to make him seem complex. And the Agarthans, while being science mole men is interesting on paper, are treated as a generic cult and makes the story so black and white that Edelgard looks stupid because of it. All three of them deserve to be on the list, really. But if I were to pick the objectively worst one, it'd have to be Garen. Evil kings in Fire Emblem are nothing new, let alone brainwashed ones. But each one always has something to add to the table, especially when tragedy is involved. Garen had none of that. He's a bland evil antagonist who does bland evil things, and yet his children are constantly trying to defend his every action because he used to be a good guy. It wouldn't be so bad if he didn't have to put up with the shtick for 3 storylines. All the stuff we know about Garen as this good king is spent on supports and exposition. But since we don't see any proof of that in the main story, it just feels like our Norian friends are caressing a rabid grizzly they call a teddy bear. It's frustrating how Xander, who is otherwise a really noble and likable character, behaves like an idiot for not putting 2 and 2 together that his father is completely deranged.
You are so in denial. You need therapy.
And for that matter, okay, why does Fates even have a central villain? Wouldn't it be better if the main authorities of Nor and Hoshido are good people with opposing ideals instead? The fact that they're trying to make the story seem deep by letting you pick which faction you want to make the best out of, yet still paint it as an angel-devil situation is just disingenuous. Heck, you can't even really call Garen a cool villain. He just rips off other evil kings by being a big armored guy, his dragon form sucks, he's just a Nankos' puppet, so his evil deeds can't even be accredited to him, and his design
looks like my own feces from my ass.
Garen fails on so many levels, I can't even call it comical. He just feels like an afterthought made out of copying past games' homework without understanding why they're as good as they are. Fortunately, there's a silver lining. Hyacinth from Engage does everything Garen did, but better in every way. He's got unique flair as a combatant, gets killed early enough that he didn't suck up too much screen time, and his daughters actually grow out of denial to accept that he's long gone. There's an actual emphasis on tragedy here that's accomplished in just half a story versus 3 bloated ones. Hopefully this is a sign that these old villain archetypes can and will be handled better in the future. Now I just need to figure out a way to stop complimenting Engage.
I think it's just like you said, I don't know, like, I mean, I don't think I ever chose, like, Engage, because, like, dude, I don't know. Sorry, I mean, back to Ganon, like, come on, guys, like, do you have, like, Stockholm Syndrome or something? And I played Fates, and you know what, I chose Revelations. Like, sure, I could have gone with Birthright, but still, there's, like, no reason to go Conquest. Like, are you really going to support Ganon? Garen, you know, like, no way. You're just asking for trouble. Or just to get stabbed in the back. Okay, final 3, here we go.
Mega Man RPGs gave the series a much-needed spin from the original formula. Battle Network and Star Force especially have a lot of solid mechanics and story beats that hold up to this day. As for Command Mission, yeah.
Where to begin?
Okay, it has great mechanics and characters, but the slow gameplay and stilted cutscenes made it age a bit worse than the other two.
Alright, fine, the game is way more stupid than I remember it being as a kid, but why do you care so much?
Because I'm also the Dark Lord with no foreshadowing.
God damn it!
Yep. Even the story doesn't help much because we got a crappy twist villain on our hands. Colonel Redips is the enforcer who orders X and the crew to fight Epsilon's rebellion army. In the final chapter, he's revealed to be the main antagonist who plotted to steal the Super Force medal so he can take over the world. Oh, it's so painfully generic. Say what we may about Wily and Sigma. It may be annoying that they try to be twist villains so many times a baby can see them coming, but at least their characters are decent. Wily has some depth that shows he's not just all evil, and Sigma's backstory is legitimately interesting. Redips has none of that. He also takes away from characters who do have them. First, there's Epsilon, an extremist who attacks Giga City to obtain what he needs to help his kin evolve, but avoids senseless violence and spares the innocent. True. We could have gotten a compelling final confrontation with them, and perhaps even offer him redemption, but nope. He dies, and Redips takes over with his by-the-book spiel. Second, Spider, a bounty hunter who shares a background with the command center of Giga City, but had a falling out with them. He's got a cool design, a fun poker motif, and even puts aside his beef for the sake of an old friend, to the point where he grows intimate enough with X to protect him at any given step. He's just Redips in disguise. Yep, all that flair and investment, and our beloved bounty hunter isn't even real. He never cared about his colleagues in the command center. He's just a greedy punk. Now, sure, I've praised twist villains who put a spin on the existence of a character before, but there's a difference between this and something like the Phantom in Ace Attorney. The Phantom works because the character they revealed to be doesn't have a fully established backstory. They have to win us purely by personality alone, which makes it more frightening when we see how well the Phantom mimics that character, considering they're a villain themed around falsifying personality. Redips actively sabotages Spider's character without any thematic significance to the story. It's just a twist for the sake of a twist. Add an uninspired final battle and a painful boss gauntlet leading up to him, and you're better off pretending that the game ended in Chapter 9. Could Redips have worked? Yes. In fact, it's not even that hard to fix. Just make Spider the real villain and Redips the fake identity. Give more gravity to how Spider hated people who sit back and let others risk their lives for them. Use that to emphasize his desire to steal the Superforce metal so he can reshape Replicate society and make them more independent. That would actually be an interesting parallel to Epsilon motives, as they both share noble goals but pursue them differently. Heck, we could even get a cool gambler-themed final boss out of it. Look, if you made us rather have Sigma as the villain again, then you know you failed as an antagonist. Considering this may be why Spider never appears in any future promotions and spin-offs to date, that's even less reason to forgive Colonel Giraffe Neck here for what he did. Danganronpa V3 garnered quite a divisive following. Part of that is from how bizarre and controversial the ending is. To the uninitiated, it's a haha, everything you love in our series is a lie shtick, or at least that's what it seems. Some people have interpreted that the ending doesn't ruin the other games, more so that it's a different timeline that treats the other games as fiction. And yes, there's some evidence to support this, and honestly, with how much the series thrives on its characters, the implications of this ending were likely never that honest to begin with. So if you really squint to the point that Clint Eastwood is jealous, you can still enjoy the series. However, even if you don't think the ending is that bad, there's no denying that the mastermind still sucks. If I could aptly describe Tsumugi Shirogane, she is the equivalent of submitting a 5-hour-long clip of a black screen to a film festival and claiming she's an artiste. Seriously, her entire character pre-reveal is just a boring geek who makes anime references and points out the obvious. Her sense of humor boils down to making puns about how plain she is, and she has no defined chemistry with the cast, making her completely interchangeable.
Gee, I wonder who they're gonna make into the main villain.
A big reason why this is so frustrating is that V3 is a long game. We spent so much time putting up with this cardboard cutout, while interesting characters with a ton of potential get snuffed out from us one by one. She makes a big chunk of the game feel like such a drag who's just waiting to get to chapter 6 so she can laugh at our faces already. But hey, surely the twist is worth it. This is what her character's been building up to, so it has to be great, right?
No.
Like all ripping off Junko and doing everything worse great, then more power to you. Happy you enjoy it. But we don't do that here. Tsumugi is yet another cocky, crazy mastermind who repeatedly chants her obsession for a whole hour until she inevitably gets her butt kicked by the protagonist shouting his lungs out. Wow, haven't seen that before. And her debacle? She's the surrogate host of Team Danganronpa. She exposes the truth that everyone in the game is fake, and they all exist for other people's amusement. Oh, but that's not all. She makes fun of how fake and powerless the main characters are before the show's will, in front of the audience that are rooting for them and wanting them to succeed. She plans to have the protagonist accept their graduation so that the killing game may continue as usual, but when the audience realized how messed up the killing game is for treating real people like fictional characters, they helped the main characters give up and end the killing game for good. And Tsumugi is surprised that this happened? Lady, you deliberately create a setup where you break the immersion of the game by revealing it's a show, make fun of your audience for liking your show, and give the main characters the key they needed to figure out how to beat you, and you somehow didn't think any of this would backfire.
Some people are really stupid.
And you know what's funny? This would have worked if Tsumugi actually wanted to ruin the game. If she's tired of hosting dozens of these killing games and wants it to end, it actually makes sense why she'd set all this up. Heck, it could even play into how bland her character is, showing that she's tired of putting in effort, so she just becomes as uninteresting as possible. But no. It wasn't deliberate. She really thought she could keep going after all this, and it's dumb. This is dumb. This is dumb. This is dumb. This is dumb. Okay. If you want to paint Tsumugi as the unsympathetic villain, why not switch the dynamic? Have the protagonist be the one to tell the audience that he and his friends are fake, and that their existence is a waste of time. That way, there's a legit reason for him to commit seppuku and stop giving the fans what they want. Meanwhile, Tsumugi would be the one who's obsessed with how real the game feels, just as the audience is. It's a great way to build a twisted world where people are parasocially obsessed with fictional characters, and would actually be a proper way to do an extreme version of the series' actual fans. There are webcomics out there that do this sort of story way better in a shorter length. Regardless of how you look at it, Tsumugi makes no sense. Apparently, the writer passes off the negative feedback her character gets as the intended reception. Well, to quote myself from earlier, intentionally insufferable is still insufferable. It's one thing to unintentionally make a bad character. It's a different story to make a bad character on purpose and pass it off as something profound. That's what Tsumugi is. She's a lousy attempt at being ironically artsy, and the less we have of villains like her, the better.
Yeah, great. You're not try at all.
Valadar, Fire Emblem Awakening. He's destined to win, so watch as he does nothing while the heroes outsmart and humiliate him. Jasper Bat Jr., No More Heroes 2. Way to trip at the finish line with a pathetic villain and a terrible boss battle. Team Flare, Pokemon X and Y. I miss Team Dimson. Darklaw, Layton vs. Wright. How not to make a sympathetic villain. Give her no personality. Tyrant Calypso, Borderlands 3. An unfunny joke machine who dies without having any dramatic moments. Alduin, Skyrim, doesn't bring down the game. Clearly. But the World Eaters wanted the most forgettable and underwhelming fights. Deadly 6, Sonic Lost World. Sonic tried to copy Mario's Koopalings. It did not work. Harry Moleman, Sam and Max. Only a villain once, a joke character elsewhere. Still, how did he even become a villain? Who took him seriously?
Number 1?
Xehanort. Where do I even begin with you? No, seriously, it's Kingdom Hearts. I don't actually know. You started out fine. A once noble scientist king who let his curiosity get the better of him. Simple, nice, serviceable, 7 out of 10. Then we find out it wasn't him, but his apprentice. And then we find out the apprentice became a heartless and a nobody. And then we find out the apprentice is actually an old Keyblade master who is inhabiting the body of a younger Keyblade master who lost his memories. Or did he lose his memories? Also, the old Keyblade master is actually not evil? And apparently he's been you the whole time? There are as many Xehanorts as there are plot holes in his character. We started with Ansem and Xemnas, who were both fun and hammy in their own ways. Though, now that I think about it, why does Ansem, or Xehanort's Heartless, call himself Ansem in the first place? If you really think about it, he didn't need to pretend to be Ansem. He could have literally done everything he did without it. And while Xemnas was super hammy, my opinion of how he really feels like someone without a heart goes out the window when we find out they had hearts the whole time. Like, seriously, Nomura? Even after we find out they have hearts, we still get that no emotion shtick from Zemi. Though now it's more comical than intimidating.
That fool Ansem said the heart's true nature was beyond his understanding. But it's not beyond mine. Hearts are the source of all power.
Seriously, why did they go out of their way to make interesting motivations of two good villains just non-existent? No pun intended. Okay, so maybe we can salvage things with Master Xehanort. And yeah, the old master wasn't bad either. At first, he was a calculating and manipulative man who was intimidating. Even in Kingdom Hearts 3, he's shown to be quite conniving. But then...
I'm actually a misguided good guy.
Who could ever believe that?
Okay, I believe you.
I'm gonna kill myself.
Every attempt to make him more sympathetic and deep just made him worse. Like, he kills Kairi, and then you try to pull this I was a hero the whole time bullcrap an hour of gameplay later. Like, what the heck? And the culmination of all this horse crap is his twerpy younger self. No, really, they gave this younger version way too much screen time, even giving him his own mobile game. Oh yeah, let me talk about that. So remember that scene in Kingdom Hearts 3 that tries to pass him off as understandable? I guess people got mad, so they made a whole mobile spin-off with Dark Road to double down on that sympathy. He turned into a Disney princess just wanting more than what I have. And when that didn't work, they gave him friends, killed them all off, and made him into a bitter loner.
It didn't work. It did not work.
Okay, so a 2,000 square pro tag. These guys didn't become villains. What's your excuse? I will say that line with Woody saying he didn't have friends does ring a bit differently. That's one good thing. Oh, and Lucy was there the whole time. Also, Xehanort was the reincarnation of the protagonist of the first mobile game.
He's Squidward, you're Squidward, I'm Squidward! Are there any other Squidwards I should know about?
Meow.
I'm out of here.
I don't even know. How does he get worse each game? Even games that are devoted to fixing him, quote unquote, just make him seem worse in comparison. He is a big part of all the annoying retcons or last-minute heel turns that make the story into a mess. Even visual novels with ridiculous lore like Umaneko and Tsukahime, they have less confusing characters with multiple versions, and they have 15 and 19 apiece.
Hocus pocus, these games have no focus.
It's interesting how the fandom's view of Xehanort has shifted. He's gone from a villain with gravitas, weight, personality, to a punchline. I feel that they didn't go out of their way to make him sympathetic or didn't change his backstory more than a League of Legends champion. He would have been consistent and ergo more effective as a result. But that's Kingdom Hearts for ya. Gotta love it. I'm the Fiery Joker, and I guess us being our own worst enemy isn't always the case. Sometimes it's whenever Nomura has a fever dream.
Own worst enemy, huh? Is it like villains that defeat themselves? I don't know. I feel like that's a thing. But yeah, you know, man, started strong, but just lore after lore just yanked it out. Sheesh. I got it with Josh. Like, why make him sympathetic? Like, come on. Like, just take what works. Hey, caramba. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys think of this list. Agree, disagree, let me know what you think was the worst. And adios.